Afghanistan's teenage girls are being forced into a future they don't want: marriage to older men. For most, it's the only future their families see in Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. The militant group has banned secondary education for girls, ordered women to cover themselves from head to toe, and forbidden them from most work. Persistent diktats like these have killed any dreams Afghan girls had of a future beyond domestic chores.
At 16 years old, Maryam never imagined she would be trapped in a marriage with someone she barely knows. But she says she had no choice from the day the Taliban barred her from school.
I never thought there would come a day that we couldn't study anymore, where we wouldn't be able to achieve our dreams, and I would become a housewife instead of becoming a doctor. Instead of studying, I now wash dishes, wash clothes, and mop the floor. All this is so hard.
In Afghanistan, life for women and girls is shrinking. The message from on top: a woman's place is at home and she should stay covered outside. A glaring contrast to this mural that somehow escaped the Taliban censors. I am still a kid. Put a school uniform on my body, not a wedding dress. But many parents feel they have no choice as money runs out. Maryam's father resisted the thought until the very last moment.
Every time people asked to marry my daughters, I said I wouldn't give their hands. I told them the girls must finish their university.
He eventually gave in. Many other girls share the same fate. It's not uncommon for them to get married voluntarily.
While I'm at home, my conscience tells me that it's better to marry rather than be a burden on my family. There's no other option left for us.
Their future is now tied to strangers, often much older, who now have the greatest say on how the rest of their lives will play out.
And joining me now for more is Fawzia Kufi. She was the first woman deputy speaker of the Afghan parliament and has negotiated with the Taliban face-to-face during the Doha talks. Welcome, Ms. Kufi. Teenage girls being married off by their families in the face of a bleak future under the Taliban. How common is this across Afghanistan now?
Obviously, child marriage is something that existed in our society. However, in the last 20 years, there were laws and regulations and awareness and measures that were taken to avoid child marriages. It has minimized and reduced to great extent. However, since the takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban, and as you rightly said, lack of any green light at the end of this tunnel for Afghan women and girls. A lot of girls are forced to marry and very young, in fact. So poverty is one reason, but the major reason in my conversation with families and the girls is lack of hope and lack of future for the girls, because there is no education, no schools for girls, no job. So even if a girl, continue her university, she doesn't go to work. So there is no future for them, and that's of course the reason.
I wonder, therefore, if it signals a resigned acceptance among people that Taliban diktats against women particularly are here to stay, that these are not going to change.
Well, people expect change. However, unfortunately, because change in the last 4 decades have always been imposed to the people from outside Afghanistan, they are hoping that there will be some level of movement from international community to help the people. When they see that there is no move, and in fact, when they see that the world is also going along the same line, how to work with Taliban, and do not look the alternative, people are disappointed, and they see that there is no hope and no future other than Taliban, although they know that this is not going to last. And I believe this is not going to last long, because no power can sustain and be sustainable by exclusionary politics. Taliban have excluded everyone from the society, from the power, from the social life, and obviously they cannot sustain. But the problem, the issue is now, how do we mobilize ourselves as international community and as politicians in Afghanistan for an alternative, including Taliban?
Yeah, but where is the international community? I mean, it's been more than a year since they took over Afghanistan. You meet a lot of world leaders. Do you get the impression that the international community has lost interest, or do you think they are actively engaging?
The international community focus has shifted. That's unfortunate. They believe that's unfortunate because the world is only able to handle one crisis at a time. And I think the case of Ukraine, now, of course, the brave woman of Iran has shifted the focus. But let's all remember that Afghanistan, if it continued to be the way it is, Taliban have inspired a lot of military extremist groups, and that those groups could pose security threats to the world. At the international community, there is unfortunately no unity. Different countries have their approach. I think the West is losing its leverage over the region and over Afghanistan. Before they completely lose that leverage, I think they need to really work, the United Nations, everybody with the political community and civil society of Afghanistan, women-led organizations and women-led movement for a political process which is genuine. And as I said before, including Taliban. I'm not in favor of exclusion of anybody. I think this is not going to, again, bring sustainability.
Let's just look at what the Taliban are doing. The Taliban supreme leader this month instructed judges to follow Sharia law. And then you had 9 women lashed in public in northeastern Afghanistan. How much worse does it get, Ms. Kufi? Is public stoning next?
I think they're going to become tougher and tougher. If you look at the trend since last September, the first edict they issued was banning girls beyond grade 6 from school. Now, if you look at that, over the last year or so, they have issued 32 edicts to eliminate women's rights. Basically, it's not a law, but it's a complete set of orders and edicts to minimize women's rights. The last one, as you said, is enforcement of Sharia, which also has its own condition, but Taliban are unfortunately doing the extreme way and in public. Previous to that was banning women and girls from public places such as parks, restaurants, and gyms. Of course, not many women in Afghanistan use these places, but the mentality of Taliban that they only see their power by eliminating women from the public and social sphere, that is something that we must challenge and we must confront.
What should Afghan women do in the interim?
Afghan women, our movement is the only mobilized movement, I would say, at the current situation against Taliban. Yes, there have not been big protests because the situation is extremely challenging. And you know that 3 weeks ago, they arrested some of my colleagues, some of the women protesters. They're still in the custody of Taliban. They were preparing a protest for 25th of November, which is the start of the campaign on violence against women or ending violence against women. We at the international level, those women who have left Afghanistan, we have mobilized ourselves to amplify the voices of our sisters from inside Afghanistan. We have been meeting, as you rightly said, leaders, institutions. It's only statements that we hear from the world leaders. I think the world leaders must support meaningfully a woman-centric political process.
We'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you so much for joining us today. Fawzia Kufi, always a pleasure.